My name is Larson, and I used to believe blood made us family. But the day I graduated, my father handed me a pen, not a hug. He wanted me to sign away my mother's house, the one she died protecting. When I refused, he didn't argue. He just said, "Then you don't belong here." I walked out with nothing. Not even my name felt like mine anymore. 7 years later, they knocked on my door, older, shaking, eyes full of regret. "We just want to see you once," they said. But I didn't open the door to family. I opened it to ghosts. And what I said next made them freeze. The rain started right as the ceremony ended, thin at first, then sharp, cold needles cutting through my blue gown. By the time I reached my car, the parking lot had emptied. Families had already driven off, cheering from inside dry vehicles, their laughter muffled by rolled-up windows. I sat behind the wheel, water dripping from my sleeves onto the steering wheel, the smell of wet asphalt filling the air. In my hand was an old photo, Mom and me on the porch of Alara House. Her smile looked just as I remembered it, patient, a little tired, but proud. The leather wallet that held the photo had cracked down the spine, just like everything else she'd left behind. I traced her face with my thumb and whispered, "You promised you'd be here." The words stayed small inside the car. The rain thickened. I started the engine, but I didn't drive right away. I just sat there, listening to the sound of it hitting the windshield. It almost covered up the silence sitting next to me, the kind that follows you home whether you want it or not. When I finally drove back, the roads glistened like oil. Portland always smelled like rain and coffee, but that day it smelled like something final. The family house, Mom called it Alara House, stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, the same gray walls, but now there were new potted plants, lavender candles burning by the window. Vivica's touch. Every trace of Mom's garden had been cleaned out. The roses were gone. I parked, grabbed my backpack, and stepped inside. The air was heavy with paint and perfume. My father sat at the kitchen table, a folder open in front of him. Vivica poured tea like it was just another quiet afternoon. "Congratulations," he said flatly. No hug, no smile. He pushed the folder toward me. "Let's take care of something important while we're all here." I stayed standing. "What's this?" "Your mother's property papers," he said, voice clipped. "The house will be transferred to family management. Vivica and I will handle the estate. It's the responsible thing to do." My throat tightened. She wanted me to keep the house. That was her wish, not yours. He looked up slowly. "Your mother wanted this family together. You keeping the house alone doesn't do that." Vivica smiled softly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Larson, honey, we just want what's fair for everyone." Fair. That word tasted sour. I looked around the kitchen. Mom's photographs were gone, the painting she loved replaced by some framed quote about gratitude. Even her teacup was missing from the shelf. "She's gone," I said quietly. "But you've made sure she's erased, too." That's when his fist hit the table. The sound cracked through the house. "Watch your mouth," he barked. "If you can't respect my decisions, you're no son of mine." The words didn't shock me. It was how easily he said them that did. I realized then, it wasn't about papers or property. He'd already decided I didn't belong here. I closed the folder, pushed it back toward him, and said, "Then I guess you're not my father either." For a second, no one moved. The rain outside hammered against the windows. Vivica didn't shout. She just turned her face away and said, almost to herself, "Let him learn." That was it. No screaming, no fight. Just quiet dismissal. I walked upstairs to my old room. The posters were gone, the shelves empty except for the urn that held Mom's ashes. I packed a few clothes, my wallet, and the urn. When I came down, he was still at the table, staring at the unsigned papers. I didn't slam the door. I wanted the silence to be the last thing he heard from me. Outside, the rain hit harder, washing the driveway clean of footprints. I stood for a moment under the porch, watching the water run down the street, and then I stepped into it. By the time I reached the car again, my hands were shaking. I set the urn in the passenger seat and started the engine. The house lights blurred behind the rain. For a moment, I thought about turning back, saying something, anything, but I knew it wouldn't matter. I looked at the coffee cup I'd left in the holder that morning. The coffee was cold now, a thin film floating on top. I almost laughed. That's what everything felt like. Cold, bitter, left out too long. I whispered to the empty seat, "I'll take care of what's left of us." The rain didn't let up. It just kept falling, steady and merciless, until the world outside disappeared. The next morning, I woke up in a motel off Route 22, the smell of wet carpet and burnt coffee reminding me just how far from home I'd already gone. The AC unit under the window made a low humming noise, trying its best to dry the air, but the damp had already settled in. It clung to the sheets, to the walls, to my skin. I sat up slowly. My back ached from the lumpy mattress, and the light creeping in through the curtains had that gray, uncommitted tone of a sky that couldn't decide whether to pour or clear. The urn sat on the nightstand, still sealed, still too heavy for something I was never ready to carry. I reached over, touched the edge gently. "You didn't deserve to end in a motel drawer, Mom," I said, voice low but steady. I showered, shaved with a disposable razor from the vending machine, and dressed in the same jeans from yesterday. My duffel bag was already looking worn, the zipper barely holding. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. Out of habit, I opened my contacts and scrolled through names I hadn't called in months. Mark, Jenna, Anthony. People I thought I could count on. I tapped 3 numbers, let them ring, straight to voicemail, one after the other. "Hey, it's Larson. Just checking in. Hope you're doing well." I didn't leave the second or third message, just hung up and stared at the phone, letting the silence fill the space. By noon, I'd walked 3 blocks to a strip mall that looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint since the early 90s. I picked up a local job flyer outside the laundromat and started making calls. "Warehouse assistant. I've got experience with inventory systems." "Janitor work? Absolutely. Nights, weekends, whatever you need." "I've got a clean license. Delivery routes are fine. I know the area." Each time the voice on the other end sounded bored or distracted. "We'll call you back," they'd say. Or worse, "We're just collecting resumes for now." I started a note on my phone. Proof I still exist. Every rejection email, every unanswered voicemail, every "will keep you on file." It sounds small, I know. But when you've got nothing else, even being told no is better than being invisible. I stopped by the diner next to the motel that evening. It was one of those places with sticky menus and chipped mugs, but the booths were warm and the coffee was cheap. I brought my sketch pad with me, just something to do with my hands. I found myself sketching the layout of a Lara house from memory. The staircase curve, the back porch, Mom's old reading nook. "You draw like someone who's remembering, not designing," a voice said beside me. I looked up. The waitress was in her 60s, hair pulled back, eyes sharp but kind. Her name tag said Marlene. Maybe both, I said. She studied the lines on the napkin. Big house? Used to be, I said, folding the sketch. Not mine anymore. She didn't press, just refilled my cup without asking and said, "It's hard to start over on an empty stomach. First one's on the house." The coffee was hot. Not perfect, but it didn't matter. It was the opposite of the cold silence I'd left behind. And for the first time in 24 hours, I didn't feel completely alone. Later that night, I lay on the motel bed, flipping through channels, not watching any of them. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello? This is Stephen Mathers, attorney for Randall Cross. Mr. Cross has instructed me to inform you that your name has been removed from the property records of the Alara estate. Kindly return any house keys still in your possession. I waited. Nothing else. No explanation. Not even a pause to hear my response. Click. That was it. Years of memories, boiled down to a call from someone I'd never met. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I just grabbed my jacket, my keys, and drove. It was nearly midnight by the time I reached the old neighborhood. I didn't pull up to the driveway, just parked along the side road and walked toward the back fence. Construction lights were on. Men I didn't recognize were carrying boxes out the front door. One of them tossed something into a bin by the porch. I walked closer, kept to the shadows. The rose garden, Mom's sanctuary, was being torn out. Shovels cutting roots that took years to grow. Flower beds overturned, soil bare and soulless. I pulled out my phone and hit record. Just a slow pan. The house, the strangers, the garden. No commentary, just proof. Then I saw it. Near the trash bin, a family photo in a cracked frame. I walked over, picked it up. The glass had splintered across the top. Mom's face was smudged, but still there. I wiped the surface with the hem of my shirt. Carefully, gently. "You'll go where I go," I whispered. I slipped the photo into my jacket pocket and walked back to the car. I didn't look back this time. By the time I made it back to Portland, the summer heat had turned the air thick and restless. A week had passed since I last stood in front of the house, but it hadn't gotten any easier. I parked the truck a block down, behind an old oak that hadn't changed since I was a kid riding bikes through this neighborhood. From that distance, Alara House didn't look like a home anymore. A new "for sale" sign leaned slightly crooked on the front lawn, white letters on red background. A QR code taped on like a last-minute patch. Below it, someone had staked a plastic post with a realtor's face beaming under the words "luxury listing." By appointment only. I sat there for a while, engine off, windows rolled down, the warmth crawling in. It was strange. How fast a place can shift from shelter to stranger. My mother used to say that house had a heartbeat. I didn't know you could sell a pulse. I waited until nightfall before stepping out. The walk down the street felt longer than it should have. The house glowed softly from inside, real estate lighting, all staged to impress. Curtains drawn just enough to tease, like a mannequin trying to look alive. I slipped through the side gate, the latch still stuck the same way it always had, squeaking just slightly. In the backyard, the garden beds were leveled, soil smoothed over like nothing ever grew there. But I could still see it. The shape of her roses. The curve of the stones she laid by hand one summer. Barefoot in the dirt, humming along with the radio. I crossed over them carefully, not stepping too hard. The sliding door to the kitchen was locked, but the lights inside let me see everything. On the counter, notes in realtor handwriting. Stage furniture delivery Thursday. Open house Friday morning. And then I saw it. Leaning against the far wall, turned backward, was the portrait. Her portrait. The one that used to hang above the fireplace, right at the center of the living room. Oil on canvas, warm brush strokes. Mom in her garden hat, smiling at something you couldn't see. They didn't throw her away. They just hid her. I don't know why that hurt more, but it did. Maybe because it was deliberate, like erasure wrapped in politeness. I moved to the side window and jimmied it slightly. Same trick I used when I forgot my keys growing up. The frame gave with a soft creak. I climbed in and went straight to the wall, lifted the painting. Dust had started to collect. I wiped it with my shirt sleeve. "You shouldn't have to face the wall to stay here," I said. "I didn't take anything else. Just that." I was halfway to the back fence again when headlights washed across the yard. I froze. The car stopped. Door opened. Vivica. She stepped out slow, handbag slung across her arm, heels clicking on the stone path. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low but sharp. I held the painting tighter. "Neither should you." She looked at me for a long second, chin slightly raised. "Your father's done trying. You made your choice." "No," I replied. "He made it when he asked me to erase her." A pause. She shifted her weight, then said too quickly, "We're just getting the place ready for sale. Randall's not even on the paperwork now. It's cleaner if it all goes through my name." That slipped. She caught herself, looked down for a moment, then back up. "It's just paperwork, Larson." "Not when you're hiding behind it," I said. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. Just walked past me, keys jangling. She didn't look back. I left the way I came, quiet, through the dark, painting tucked under one arm like a shield. By the time I got back to the motel, it was close to 2 a.m. The lobby was closed. I walked past the vending machines, up the stairs and into my room. The light buzzed when I flicked it on. I set the painting down on the table and stared at it for a while. Then I pulled out my notebook. The real one, not the phone notes. I began listing everything. The phone call from the lawyer, the removal from the deed, the for sale listing, Vivica's name on the sale, her slip-up, dates, times, statements. I wasn't just mourning anymore. I was documenting. The next morning, I walked into the diner, bleary-eyed but focused. Marlene was behind the counter, wiping down mugs. She looked up and nodded. "Didn't sleep?" "Didn't need to," I said. She poured me a cup. "You're building a case, aren't you?" I nodded, took the coffee. "No one believes the quiet ones," I said, "until they bring receipts." She didn't smile, just placed a small plate of toast beside me and walked off. Back in the room, I set the portrait on the desk beside the photograph I'd rescued earlier. Both of them together now, two pieces of a woman they tried to erase. I reached for the coffee I'd just bought, steam still curling off the surface, next to the cup from days ago, still cold, still full. This one I sipped. And the bitterness? It didn't sting anymore. It burned just right. The next 2 weeks blurred into a haze of half-slept nights and obsessive checking of local listings, legal forums, and county databases. I kept thinking that maybe I had it wrong, that there had to be some trace of her left in the official records. I was still clinging to the hope that bureaucracy wasn't heartless, just slow. But that morning in Salem, when I walked into the Marion County Recorder's office, the air told me otherwise. It smelled of toner and old carpet. Nothing nostalgic, just impersonal. The clerk behind the glass didn't ask many questions. Just typed in the address, paused, looked at her screen like something didn't sit right, then hit print. The paper slid out, warm and flat, but it might as well have been carved in ice. I scanned it fast, then again slower. Owner, Vivica Moran. Former owner, Randall Moran. No mention of Alara Moran. Not in the chain of title, not in footnotes, not even in the metadata. It was like she'd never existed. Then, just below the signature line, in a block of legalese that made my stomach drop, transfer authorized via amended family trust. Amended. Not inherited, not transferred due to death. No, amended. That meant they'd gone into her trust and rewritten it. Not just bending the truth, this was a surgical removal, legal theft, blessed by notarized ink. I stood there, gripping the paper so tightly it crinkled. My thumb smeared the ink slightly, but it didn't matter. The truth had already been wiped clean. They didn't just take her house, they erased her from history. I drove a few blocks down to a cafe I'd been to before, one of those places with chipped mugs and creaky booths. I slid into the corner and spread the papers on the table, barely hearing the server ask if I wanted coffee. I just nodded. Every line I read scraped at my ribs. Randall's signature in bold. Witnesses I didn't recognize. Dates that lined up suspiciously close to the days she was too sick to speak for herself. It wasn't just betrayal, it was architecture. A betrayal built slowly, carefully, so that by the time I noticed, the walls had already been moved. I remembered him telling me, "Your mother would have wanted you to keep the family together." Now I knew what he meant. Family was whatever he could control. And my mother? She was never part of that equation in his version. My phone buzzed. Marlene. I answered with nothing but breath at first. "You sound like someone staring at something they shouldn't have found," she said gently. "They buried her twice," I said, once in the ground, once on paper. There was silence, then her voice. "Then it's time you start digging her back out." Her words didn't ignite me like a pep talk. They settled, anchored me. I folded the deed gently and tucked it into my bag like evidence at a crime scene. That night, back in the motel, I started sorting through the old boxes I'd managed to salvage. Photos with date, stamps, tax receipts in her handwriting, emails she'd sent me with that same warm line at the end, "Love, Mom," followed by her digital signature. Voice messages I hadn't had the stomach to listen to before. I started labeling folders on my laptop, not by case number, but by what they meant. Proof she existed, the silence, trust. Hours passed. The motel clock ticked on like a metronome. Then, buried in an old drive she used for recipes and family schedules, I found something unexpected. A video. It took a minute to load. The screen flickering before her face came into focus. She was sitting on the front porch, wearing that same faded cardigan she always called her thinking sweater. The one she wore when bills were due or when she was planning garden layouts. "Hi, baby," she said to the camera. Her voice trembled a little, but not from weakness. It was choice. "If they ever tell you this house isn't yours, remember, I built it with your name in the walls." She looked down, then back up. "I'm not sure how much time I have, but if you're watching this, I know something went wrong. Just don't let them convince you you're crazy. You're not. You remember, right?" The screen went black. I sat there in silence for a long while. Then I copied the video 3 times, one to my email, one to a secure cloud account, one to a hard drive I tucked in my duffel. I didn't call my father. I didn't message Vivica. They didn't need to know I'd seen it. Instead, I sent every file, emails, recordings, receipts, to a lawyer friend from college, the kind who now lived in a condo but still owed me for bailing him out senior year, I sent another batch to a backup Gmail I hadn't touched in years. One more went into a USB I taped behind the motel nightstand, just in case. Let them think I was still licking wounds. The louder they get, the calmer I'll stay. That's how truth sounds before it hits. I saved the final folder under one name, Mother Proof 01. I closed the laptop, exhaled through my nose, and looked around the dim room. The air was still. Outside, traffic hissed past the window, but in here, it was quiet. Before I left the cafe that morning, I'd seen an elderly couple sharing a single mug of coffee between them, hands overlapping on the handle. Soft laughter. It had caught me off guard, something in the tenderness of that moment. She deserved that kind of love, I whispered, not this, not silence and deletion. But we weren't done, not even close. I thought evidence would give me peace. Instead, it gave me a reason to fight. 2 days later, a message pinged through my phone like a thorn pressing under the skin. Dinner, Sunday, 7 p.m., just family, let's talk. Dad. No greeting, no question, no apology, just a summons dressed as an olive branch. I stared at the message for a while, rereading it like it might reveal something new. It didn't. It was Randall, pure and sharp-edged, hiding commands inside courtesies. I said yes, not because I expected healing, and not because I wanted answers. I went because I had them, because I was done playing son. I was bringing proof. That evening, I wore a simple dark suit, one my mother helped me pick out before her final chemo round. It still carried a faint scent of cedar from her old closet. In my inside jacket pocket, I slid her cleaned photo, her face restored under glass. In my wallet, a USB drive. A quiet threat, the kind you don't flash until it matters. When you're invited to a war disguised as dinner, you bring truth as your weapon. The mansion was colder than I remembered. Whiter, too. Vivica's fingerprints were all over it. Every piece of warmth had been stripped and replaced with glass and gloss. Even the doormat was new. It no longer said home, just welcome in cursive that didn't mean it. Randall opened the door with a tight-lipped smile. Glad you could make it, he said. It's been too long. I stepped in and looked around. Not long enough. In the dining room, under that chandelier Vivica once called her crown jewel, sat a long table. At the end, there was a man I didn't recognize, early 30s, clean-cut, wearing a realtor's badge that flashed when he raised his wine glass. So much for just family. Vivica didn't look up from her seat. She just swirled her Merlot and said, "Let's make this quick." The meal was already plated. Steak, asparagus, mashed potatoes, manufactured comfort. No one touched the food for a while. The air buzzed with expectation, like everyone was waiting for a cue. Randall gave it. Halfway through the silence, he slid a folder across the table toward me. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "This is a settlement agreement," he said. "You'll receive a modest trust. We finalize the sale. You walk away with closure. No further disputes." He didn't say, "For your mother." Not anymore. That fiction had expired. I didn't open the folder. Instead, I looked at him, then Vivica. "You've been moving on since the day she died." Vivica scoffed. "Still obsessed with ghosts. It's not healthy, Larson." I reached into my pocket, pulled out the USB drive, and set it gently on the table. Then maybe this ghost should speak for herself. Randall's brow furrowed. Vivica's wine glass paused midair. I rose slowly, walked to the living room, where the big screen TV now hung in place of the painting my mother once I loved. An autumn landscape, she said, reminded her of Maine. Gone. I plugged in the drive. The screen lit up. There she was. Ilara Moran, sitting on the front porch in her favorite cardigan, her voice calm, her gaze unwavering. "If they ever take this house from you," she said, "don't give them peace. Give them proof." Her voice echoed into the room like a hymn. Randall's fork clattered against his plate. Vivica's glass slipped, shattered. Red wine blooming across the white tablecloth like a wound. I turned back toward them, steady. "That's her signature on the original deed," I said, "and that's her voice." No one spoke for a long moment. Randall finally broke the silence, but the control had cracked in his voice. "You don't understand what she did, what debts she left, what we had to cover for." I walked back to the table, didn't sit. "I understand enough," I said. "You built your empire on her silence, but she's not quiet anymore." Vivica stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor, her voice high and sharp. "I won't be humiliated in my own home." I didn't reply. Randall's hand hovered over the unsigned documents. The pen rolled off the table, landed on the hardwood with a hollow click. No one picked it up. I turned and walked toward the grand piano near the hallway, the one no one played anymore. I pulled out the photo from my pocket, the one I'd cleaned and restored in that motel room with trembling fingers. I placed it on top, directly under the chandelier. Light glinted across the glass. Her eyes, soft, fierce, familiar, now stared back into the home she built. For the first time in years, her face was where it belonged. I didn't slam the door when I left. Didn't look back. I didn't need to yell. The truth was loud enough. I thought the war ended that night, but the next morning proved some people don't lose quietly. The buzz of my phone woke me before the sun did. I reached for it half asleep, thinking maybe Marlene had sent a text. But it wasn't her name on the screen. It was a storm. Over 20 notifications, headlines, tags, texts. Estranged son accused of defrauding family trust. Businessman Randall Moran faces estate battle with son over $5 million home. I sat up fast. My chest tightened before my mind caught up. I opened the first article. There it was. My name spelled out in bold font. Photos pulled from old yearbooks and grainy graduation shots. A smiling picture of Vivica with a headline twisting her into the victim. She'd leaked it, spun a story out of fiction, twist S11. I didn't see it coming, but I should have. They claimed I manipulated my mother in her final months, forged paperwork, isolated her from the real family. They painted me as a bitter, greedy son who preyed on a dying woman. I read each paragraph slowly, not because I didn't understand, but because every word cut deeper if I let it. Texts from college friends poured in. "Hey man, is this true? Didn't want to believe it, but your name's everywhere. I thought you were close with your mom." I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I looked at the photo on my desk, the one I'd placed under the morning light each day since I moved in. My mother's face, steady and full of life. She didn't look betrayed. She looked like she was watching me figure it out. "They took her name once," I whispered. "Now they're taking mine." By noon, the sidewalk outside my apartment was crawling with reporters. Some held microphones, others had phones aimed at my door like weapons. I pulled the blinds shut. Neighbors whispered in the hallway. Footsteps paused too long outside my door. I heard someone mutter, "That's the guy on the news." Even Marlene called with concern. "They're using PR lawyers," she warned. "People who get paid to twist air into arrows. They'll spin this before you even breathe." I looked out at the chaos gathering on my street and said, "Then I'll stop giving them air." That night, I went offline, deleted everything I'd posted over the years, scrubbed my presence clean. But it wasn't retreat. It was recoil. Then came Twist S12, an anonymous email. Subject line, for your fight. From unknown and secure mail net attachment. Trust Chart Amendment Draft PDF. I opened it. There it was. A fake trust amendment. Time-stamped 2 months after my mother passed. The language was clumsy. The formatting off. A PDF pretending to be real law. And the worst part? Randall's initials were already typed at the bottom. Vivica's signature was scanned in. The leak was internal. Someone close had decided to crack, and they handed me the weapon. Hours passed before I realized the sun had gone down. I texted Marlene to meet. We parked near the Willamette River, neutral ground, dark and wet with Oregon rain. We sat in her car, headlights off, the cabin quiet but charged. She held the printed amendment draft, eyes scanning quickly. You could go public with this, she said, voice low. Leak it. Let the world see what they did. I shook my head slowly. Not yet, I said. I want them to think I'm broken. Let them enjoy their victory. I laid out the plan. Step 1, wait for the next probate court hearing. Step 2, present the time-stamped amendment. Step 3, deliver a public statement, calm, factual, devastating. When they fall, I said, I want it to echo. Marlene didn't say much after that. She just reached over and gave my hand one firm squeeze, the kind my mother used to give when I was about to speak up for myself as a kid. Back in my apartment, hours later, I made the mistake of scrolling through the news again. The smear was everywhere. Social media threads laced with cruelty from strangers. Ungrateful kid. She gave him everything and he turned on the family. These kids only care about inheritance. I read until my hands trembled, not from fear, but from knowing how close they were to getting away with it. You called me ungrateful? I said aloud. Let's see how grateful truth can be. I clicked play on the video again, the one of her sitting on the porch. Her voice steadied me. Don't let them turn your name into theirs. She wasn't just warning me. She was guiding me. I closed the laptop. The storm outside had softened into a distant hush. My room was dim, the city's low hum reaching through the cracks in the window. I stared at the black screen for a long time, my reflection barely visible. Tomorrow, I whispered, I stopped being their story. They tried to destroy my name in public, so I decided to end theirs, in court. 3 weeks later, I stood outside the Multnomah County Courthouse in the same dark suit I wore to the dinner where this all began. The same suit that had absorbed my mother's scent when I pressed her photo to my chest. The tie was different, thinner, sharper. I didn't come dressed as a son today. I came as a witness. Inside, the air was sterile. Fluorescent lighting washed the color out of everything. People whispered in hushed tones. Reporters hovered near the benches like vultures waiting for something to fall. My boots echoed off the marble floor with each step. Across the aisle, Randall sat stiff in a navy jacket he used to wear to board meetings. He avoided my eyes. Vivica, on the other hand, tilted her chin and offered the faintest smirk, as if this were just another social inconvenience. Her lipstick was perfect. So was her alibi. They always looked taller when standing over me, I thought. Let's see how tall they look when sitting under oath. Court was called to order. The judge, a stern woman with salt and pepper hair and a voice that left no room for nonsense, welcomed the jury. Then came the opening arguments. Vivica's lawyer, a polished man with a voice like syrup and a smile too fixed to be sincere, began with a story. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, this is a case of betrayal. A grieving widow and her husband trusted their son, only to be misled in their most vulnerable hour. He painted me as a cunning manipulator, claimed I'd isolated my mother, forged documents, and taken advantage of grief. He gestured to Vivica, whose eyes gleamed like someone watching a fire they'd started. Then it was Avery Boone's turn. My lawyer, my old friend, the man who once slept on my couch in college while studying for the bar. He stood without notes. "What you're about to see," he said, "isn't a family dispute. It's an erasure." Then he introduced Exhibit A-Twist S13. On the courtroom monitor, the digital trust files appeared, date-stamped, time-locked. Created 3 months after Alara Moran, my mother, was already gone. You could hear the breath leave the room. Even the judge leaned slightly forward. Avery continued. These amendments, supposedly signed by a dying woman, were typed and edited weeks after her funeral. Not one line was recorded prior. Vivica shifted in her seat, her nails tapping quietly against her water glass. Then came the second blow. A video began to play. My mother, sitting on her favorite wicker chair, son behind her, eyes gentle but clear. "If they ever tell you this house isn't yours," she said, voice steady, "remember, I built it with your name in the walls." Her voice filled the courtroom. Every seat was still. Even the jury, who had been warned not to let emotion cloud judgment, couldn't help but lean in. Randall's jaw clenched. His lawyer stood to object, but the judge overruled. Vivica leaned toward her attorney and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "That recording could have been faked." Avery turned without missing a beat. "So could the amendment, but only one has your login credentials embedded. Twist S14. A court-appointed digital forensics expert testified that the metadata of the trust amendment showed it was last saved on Vivica's personal laptop, her login, her IP address, her digital fingerprint, no escaping it." She turned pale. Randall looked down at the floor. Then, finally, he spoke. "I didn't want to lose the house," he said, voice dry and cracked. "It was supposed to stay in the family." I stood. "It was family," I said quietly, "until you decided blood was a contract." The judge called for a recess. Randall collapsed into his chair, suddenly looking a decade older. Vivica didn't follow him out. She stared at him instead, like a woman watching a ship she built go down with someone else's hands on the wheel. Outside, the crowd was waiting. Microphones, cameras, headlines in the making. I didn't say a word. Instead, I reached into my coat and pulled out my mother's photo. The same one they tried to hide, tried to turn face down against the wall. I walked to the top of the courthouse steps and placed it there, upright, facing the world. Let them see her. Let them see the woman who built more than a house. Let them see what truth looked like in daylight. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I needed her name back. And I got it. They lost the case, but victory never feels clean when it costs the only family you had. A week passed. Portland's skies had that late spring gray, the kind that pretends to rain but never quite follows through. I hadn't stepped foot in the house since the trial, until today. The drive to Alara House was quiet. No music, no phone calls, just the sound of tires over damp pavement and the occasional creak of my old steering wheel. The gate stood open when I arrived. No welcome sign. Just wind in the trees and a silence that pressed against my chest. I parked under the maple tree she used to string lights on in December. As I stepped out, I could still picture her waving from the porch, flour dusting her apron, a cup of tea in hand. That image broke something soft inside me. The front door hadn't changed. Same polished brass knob, same faint creak at the hinge. My hand lingered on the initials she once carved there. EM. Worn now, but still visible. I stepped inside. No parade, no applause. Just echoes of footsteps that once ran these floors. Mine. Hers. Ours. I walked the room slowly, each one a memory waiting to ambush me. The living room still smelled faintly of lavender oil and old books. The couch had been covered with sheets. Furniture tucked like the house had been holding its breath all this time. Out back, the rose garden was overrun. Weeds had clawed their way through the beds she used to kneel in. I dropped to my knees and started pulling. One stem, one root. Each handful dirtied my palms, but calmed my mind. I won the house back, I whispered. But I'd trade every inch of it to hear her voice just once more. Inside again, I wandered into the hallway and paused where the pencil lines still ran up the wall, each one marking my height as I grew. She'd always added the date and a little heart beside each. I ran my fingers across them like Braille, reading our history. In the kitchen, I crouched down, remembering. Behind the counter, near the vent, I found it. A shallow scratch where I'd tried to carve my initials when I was 7. She caught me. Didn't scold. Just smiled and handed me paper and pen instead. That's when I noticed the warped panel near the baseboard. It had shifted slightly, as if time wanted it found. I pulled gently. Behind it, a tin box. My chest tightened. Her handwriting, elegant, all caps, ran across the top. If you found this, you already know what matters. Inside was a small silver locket, a photo of us from the beach trip when I was 10, and a folded letter. I sat on the floor. Sunlight through the window spilled across my lap as I opened it. My sweet boy, if this house ever feels too heavy to live in, remember, it was built for love, not for ownership. They may fight over deeds and signatures, but you and I, we built this home with memories. Let them argue over walls. I trust you'll remember the heart between them. Love always, Mom. I didn't cry. Not right then. I just sat still, letting her words wrap around the hollow she left. Later that afternoon, as the sun hung low, there was a knock at the gate. It was Randall. He wasn't in a suit, no folder in hand, no lawyer, just an old man in a light jacket, looking more like someone searching for peace than permission. I didn't say anything, just unlocked the gate and let it swing open. He stepped slowly across the lawn, stopped at the rose bush I'd cleared. She loved this place, he said, voice gravelly, more than she ever loved me. I didn't meet his eyes. She didn't love walls or rooms, I said. She loved what they held. He nodded. Nothing more. The silence between us was thick but not hostile. Just spent. I reached down, clipped one rose from the bush she planted, and handed it to him. No speech. No conditions. He took it with trembling fingers, eyes wet but unashamed. Then, without another word, he turned and left. I stayed. As twilight settled, I sat on the porch steps, the letter still in my hand. The air had cooled. Crickets began their rhythm, and somewhere in the breeze, faint and fleeting, I thought I heard her laugh. Or maybe it was just memory playing kind. Marlene called. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Having it all back?" I smiled. "I didn't get it back," I said. "I just stopped letting them take it." When the stars blinked through the clouds, I stepped inside. The chandelier glowed softly in the dining room, warm, familiar. The family photo now hung centered on the wall, her face clean, framed, present. I slid the letter behind the frame, beneath the glass. "I kept the promise, Mom," I whispered. And for the first time in years, It felt like the house exhaled. 7 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw either of their faces. The house had changed. New roof, redone floors, warmer colors inside. I hadn't just rebuilt it. I rebuilt myself too. It was early winter, the kind of evening where the air turned sharp just after sunset. I was in the workshop out back, finishing a rocking chair for a neighbor's baby shower, when I heard the doorbell. Not a knock, the bell. I rarely heard it anymore. People who knew me just texted. Clients called. The few friends I kept simply walked right in. I wiped my hands, headed toward the house, each step quiet over the gravel path. Inside, the living room lights were on low. The porch light cast a soft circle on the front steps. I opened the door. There they were, Randall and Vivica, older, thinner, worn in ways time alone couldn't explain. He looked smaller, hunched slightly as if gravity had gotten personal. She had no makeup, her eyes sunken, lips chapped, hair pulled back in a way I'd never seen before. No polish, just survival. Randall's lips parted first. We just wanted to see you once. The space between us felt like two countries separated by an ocean that had long dried up. The porch light lit the threshold, a line, and they hadn't crossed it. Inside me, something stirred. Not rage, not grief, just clarity. 7 years ago, I walked out of that courtroom and never looked back. 7 years of building a quiet life, helping restore old homes, drinking my coffee in peace, letting the seasons pass without their shadows creeping through. And now, here they were. I didn't speak. I didn't step aside. I just studied them. Vivica tried to smile, but her voice cracked before the smile could settle. "We're not here for money," she said. "We're sick. Randall's heart. It's not good." Her hand lightly touched his arm, and I could see the subtle tremor there. It might have been cold or fear, or maybe both. I crossed my arms. "You should see a doctor," I said calmly. "Not me." Randall lowered his head. His voice was lower than I remembered. "You were right, son. I let greed take everything that mattered." The word son used to cut. Tonight, it landed with no weight at all. I answered him the way I'd rehearsed in silence for years, if the moment ever came. "No, Dad. You didn't let it. You chose it." That word, chose, hung in the air like frost. They didn't argue, no defense, just the creaking of the winter wind brushing dead leaves across the porch. We stood in silence. Vivica's eyes filled. Not the crocodile kind, not performative. This was different, older, maybe even honest. She whispered, barely audible, "We just wanted to see our family again." I looked past them, into the dark street, where the world kept moving. A car drove by, headlights flickering briefly over the driveway. I stepped forward, just enough to be seen clearly. "See who?" I asked, my voice steady. "Family? What family?" No venom, just truth. Just the sentence they'd written for themselves years ago, coming full circle. Vivica's face twisted, not in anger, but recognition. She stepped back. Randall didn't speak again. He simply nodded, barely holding her arm for balance. They turned and walked away. I closed the door gently behind them. No slam, just the soft click of finality. Inside, the house felt warm, still, real. I leaned against the door for a moment, then crossed the room to the bookshelf where her photo still sat. Mom holding a young version of me on the beach, laughing into the wind. I picked up the frame and said softly, "They came back, Mom." But I didn't need to win again. I already did. On the same shelf, under a glass dome, the rose from her garden had dried perfectly over the years. its color faded, but the shape intact, love preserved in time. Outside, the trees rustled with the breath of the season. I turned, heading back to the small table in the den where a half-finished wooden chair waited. I picked up the sanding block, smoothed out the armrest, and started humming. It was the same lullaby she used to hum when the nights were too long and the house too quiet. Somewhere between the rhythm of the sandpaper and the tune, I realized something. Some doors aren't closed out of bitterness.